some of these videos that I made a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking about well, kind of the metaphor of swarms, or swarms of insects, or flocks of birds, or shoals of fish, as a kind of an analogy for thought processes. Imagining how the way that flocks of birds fly through the sky, or schools of fish fly, sort of swim through the water, being similar to the way that patterns of activation kind of sweep over sweep across the substrate of the brain, following some kind of periodic landscape, as I described it, kind of probability landscape forged out of the differently weighted neuronal connections. And I quite like that image. I think it's more kind of intuitively satisfying than the idea that thoughts or activation patterns, or however you think of it, can move through the brain with a kind of singular pulse of energy. That doesn't feel realistic at all to me. But so the idea of a swarm sweeping through there feels much more experientially valid. One of the distinctions, I guess, I'm not even sure this is a distinction actually, but certainly when I look in the sky and there's a flock of birds there, and they're all doing that fantastic thing they do, where they all tip their wings at the same time, and you get this great flash of different coloured undersurface of the wing, all in unison. When you experience that kind of a thing, baby guy, come on. What your attention is always drawn to, or at least my attention is drawn to, is the flock of birds itself. And I never think much about the actual substrate that they're flying through, which is just the air, I suppose. But in terms of the complexity of the procedure that's actually happening there, the actual substrate, the air, is probably doing something even probably more complex than the birds themselves. Because the birds, in a way, are just kind of following one another through some kind of simple set of rules. But they're also responding to the fluctuations in air pressure, the fluctuations in the kind of turbulence of the air, the winds that are blowing, and indeed the turbulence that they themselves are kicking up by flying through the air. So the air itself, even though you can't see it, it seems to me, is more complex, or carries at least as much of the intelligence of the action as the birds themselves. Now I'm kind of imagining that, because I can't visualize that. How I'm kind of imagining that is that instead of flying through the sky, I'm imagining lots of birds flying through a forest, or flying through woodlands. I'm not even sure if flocks do fly through woodlands, but to the extent that they must, that gives quite a more interesting picture for me. Because there they'll be kind of flitting from branch to branch, and kind of keep it together as a flock, but also their actions are very tightly interwoven with the landscape, and with the kind of complexity and the intelligence of that landscape. And they'll also be contributing to that, because as they fly through, they'll be making changes to that landscape. They'll be landing on branches, snapping off twigs, planting seeds as they go through their droppings. What that kind of stuff will be happening. Now I imagine a kind of similar thing happening with activation patterns in the brain. That the intelligence of thoughts, if that's the right word, is not necessarily carried by the activation patterns, it's carried by the periodic landscape that it both travels through and helps to shape.